Yeah. Okay. All right. So I call it the TESS. It's the development of, I've been doing research on public spaces maybe for 30 years. I started on plazas in Latin America. I've worked in all the parks in New York. I've worked in, well, it doesn't matter, huge parks, little parks, plazas for a long, long time. I'm basically interested in how, as social scientists, that we can understand the life of public space and also, as you'll see, be critical about it so that we learn enough that we can really understand what is going on. And the most recent, one of the big issues for an anthropologist is I go to Costa Rica to study a plaza. I might go for a year or certainly 3 months, and have worked with designers. I taught design at the University of Pennsylvania for many years, and my students who were like you, they were getting masters in landscape architecture and urban design. They didn't have 3 months. So I've spent part of my career trying to design little ways of doing research that are fast and simple and yet will give you more information than you would have by just walking there yourself or doing a questionnaire. That a test is an in-depth method, it's a qualitative method, and it's for studying everyday life and culture. And what the point is, and people say, what is ethnography? I think that's next. Ethnography, a toolkit, I'm not just looking at behavior, the number of people, or where that behavior is located. That is something that all of you are taught to do, I think, pretty well in design school, right? Is that not true? You all know how to map and whatever. Ethnography, or the kinds of methods that I'm interested in, are qualitative, but they try to uncover the cultural rules, beliefs, and practices that make up everyday life. It complements quantitative. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do big surveys because those are random samples. But if you're going to design a space or be an urban designer, you really need to know about the meaning and the context of the place. You need to know about conflicts and prejudice. You need to know about the things that people can't necessarily always tell you. And then that's why the test was developed. The test is an ethnography as opposed to just I don't know, what do you call it, Hendrik, when you go to the field and you just sort of do a reconnaissance? Do you call it a reconnaissance? You know, do you have a name for it? I mean, everyone does it. You go to a space and look at it. What do you call it, any of you?
Probably field studies or
field studies or something.
Site research.
So, yeah. Huh? Site research. That's it. Okay.
But field
So
studies.
what I do is just a little bit different, and I think I have found it's very useful for design in that my technique spatializes culture. It locates the social relations, institutions, representations, symbols in particular places. So it's a little more intricate from a symbolic point of view or from a meaning point of view. I really want to know how, not just what you see happening there, but how people are experiencing the site themselves and why they make the choices and behave in the ways that they do, so that you can either accommodate them better or worse or whatever. So you really understand the meaning. It focuses on placemaking. Placemaking is not a term that was developed by the Project for Public Spaces. It's the idea that all people, in fact, take space, any space, and make it their own. Yeah, and so placemaking, so in any space, any street where everyone's protesting, right? You've had all your protests in your streets. There was a lot of placemaking as when they started living at the university or whatever. It's all the ways that people make a place into something, and placemaking has to do with the power relations in producing the built environment, and it analyzes places to uncover the social and political economic systems. Is that clear? So that the method is not just to count or map. It is ideally when you get good at it, you can see what is generating what you're seeing. And I think that's what makes it a little different and why I think it's useful. I would like it if people could ask questions. You would have to unmute yourselves. I have a feeling this is, but I am not used to such quiet class. So I just want
Well,
you to.
I
They
think
are. Yeah.
you can, everyone can say something. I mean, you can unmute yourself. They're
You
just
can, yeah.
polite. Yeah, they're just polite.
I know you're polite. I know you're polite. I'm just saying that, all right, so now, but polite or not, I have to figure out how, why will it not go?
Maybe just click.
Next, I got it there. No.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so here is the toolkit, which you have a copy of. This is really behaving.
Maybe you
Let me,
just click one time with the cursor into the, yeah, then it should
oh,
work.
there, maybe you think it's the aha. Okay, so I've already said this. I'm going to go quickly. The most a long test could be 6 weeks, but it could also be 6 days. But what I want you to see is it's made up of doing different kinds of things. And even in this remote ethnography, I still think that one of the strengths of this method is that you, in fact, are doing more than one thing. And what happens is that each of these kinds of methods will produce a certain sense of a place, and you're going to look across these different sets of data, and I will try to show you how that works. So you're going to write field notes, you'll do mapping, participant observation from a distance, interviewing maybe by Zoom, documenting history is not going to be a problem, and I have some other new ideas to complement it. So the first and most basic part of doing field work from an ethnographic point of view, from this kind of cultural, deeper point of view, is that you will be taking field notes. Oops. And field notes are a running account of what you see. Now, what we're going to see, I think we have to come back to it, but I see no reason that you still couldn't use this method of field notes. What happens in the field is you write down your observations as carefully as you can, and then on the second half of this sheet, if you all see this, you put down the kinds of things that you're thinking. So this is Tompkins Square Park in New York City, and it says I'm seated on a green bench. You can probably see it on the southwest corner, and it's a description of where I'm sitting and what I'm seeing. I can hear the skateboarders. There are 2 blonde women throwing a dog, and then over here you have insights and questions, and I go, although the park has noises of birds, it also feels very located in a city. So that field notes are personal. It's a subjective method. But you try very hard. You don't have to do it split like this. I don't actually split it. I do it differently. But what you're trying to do is observe and then write what you feel or experience, because that's going to become valuable later. You can use field notes on videos. We could look at videos of spaces. I believe that we can use field notes with lots of online materials. What's important about the field note, you see I have memos, is that if you're in a space, let's say you're a distant, I'm going to show you some pictures where you're pretty distant and you're watching. You quickly write down things, but and those are called scratch notes. But when you go home, you want to write down everything you remember, because it's the written piece of paper with the observations written in greater detail that become your data. It's in your head, but you need to get it on paper. And if you don't, you can't ever share it with anyone. And when you come back, when you start a project, it's really important to take notes of what you think in the very beginning, because they will change. And so it's important to keep doing this kind of practice. Have any of you ever taken field notes? Yes, no, most no. I can't see. Yes. Yeah, okay. All right, so this is going to take me too long. So I'm just going to give you some examples. This is Joburg Park in Johannesburg, and I have a question for you. What do you think I might find? What do you think you might find in my field notes? Can someone answer me? And what might be in my personal comments?
Mm, these
Anybody?
are all male rather than female.
Yes. Who's that? They are all male, and I'm what? A female, right?
Yeah,
How might that feel? Might that feel uncomfortable?
maybe.
Yeah.
And
So
how
in
do you talk to them?
Yeah, it might be
Yeah.
hard to talk to them. It's exactly right. Okay, so gender matters here. And in my observation, I might describe these men and then I might be saying, I'm really uncomfortable. You know, the first time I went to my plaza, if you look at in my book on the plaza, I was totally scared. It was all men. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And then little by little, actually, I was in a space in Taiwan, Hendrik. I'm going to have to ask Ray where it was. It was a very male space. Older men, many homeless men who had their clothes in bundles. And I thought, gee, this was a male space. But the men were very nice. I mean, I had a translator, but it took a while, you know. So, okay, so here you would have an observation. These men have these chess pieces. It's sunny. They're sitting on benches, on and on. But also you would have the personal comment that I am both female and I'm also white. And as you know, right now we are protesting that these men from an American point of view are black, and I would expect that they would see me as white. However, in Africa, it's not so important that the black-white divisions, do you know?
Yes.
Things that might be important in one culture are not necessarily important. So field notes are a place you can record this. I'll give you one more example. Good job. This is even more complicated. This is in Myanmar. And here you could be doing remote ethnography, but I think this is too complicated. I asked the question, how would you start taking notes here? It's a pretty tough question. Any of you have any idea what you might do? It's hard. Have any of you been to villages like this? No, none of you. All right, well, anyhow, this is a tough situation. Again, it's very male in the center, and there's some shopping street here, and there were people sitting at the platform. And I wasn't sure what I would do. Now, today with COVID, I couldn't. I actually ended up going over and meeting people on the platform, and then they helped me talk to the men on the boats and the people in the street. Another thing might be is you go shop on that street, and you might meet someone who might talk to you. But you have to find some way to feel comfortable, even in an urban environment like you're going to be in. Okay, so that's taking field notes. The first thing I usually do on a site is do mapping, and I'm going to simply let you, because of time, I'm going to let you just look at the different kinds of maps. I'm assuming that you are familiar with doing maps. And this is something that you can do from a distance, right? Most of you have mapped the site. You know how to make a base map and then to fill in where people are and what they're doing, what their movements are. Physical traces is looking at early in the morning what you find. Are there bottles? Are there needles? Are there clothing? You know, you get a sense of who was there during the night if you can't, but the physical traces. Where are the patches of erosion? Where are the things broken down? And you don't have to use this form. And, you know, sometimes I have students trying to listen to sound in a place. This is something, again, we can do remotely. Sound tells you quite a bit about a site and how it feels and what's going on. I mean, if you had done the Corona Plaza, like Miodrag was talking about, the sound is a very important piece. And where in Hudson Yards, actually sound plays a completely different role. And the sensory map. I mean, he tried to make that pretty clear. You would smell food cooking in Corona Plaza. Lots of ethnic groups are having, and you saw the vendors, you know, on the edges. And but these are things that you take for granted, but are really very much about the experience of space and give you more of a sense of its experience, and that is helpful for a design point of view. I think that we can do this, Hendrik, if you want. There's no reason you can't do a certain amount of mapping even now. So I'm not going to have time to talk about this, but look at here. I'm mapping, and I'm way away from everybody. And this is Stockholm. And I ask a question here: what are the fixed features and what are the moving features? What are people doing? How would you record the different levels of activity? Are you with me? Somebody give me do you follow me?
Yes.
Well, Hendrik does. I'm one of the students. Am I being clear? Okay. All right. So and here's another one. This is also Stockholm, right? But you could show me, what about a strolling park or something? I mean, I don't think you have to get that close to be able to map people. And here I have a question about you as designers. Would you record the grass and the paving? Would you record the movement with the strollers? Would you record individual walkers? How do you notate the youth who are sitting on the grass? How do they make up a ballet in some way? Can your map capture that? Not just the fixed features, but how do you capture the multiple forms of movement that are happening here that are important for you as an analyst? And this is a bus station in Brasilia. Again, I'm up above. I'm nowhere near it. So, I mean, if you can get up above, I think you could probably do some pretty good mapping. And you get a very good idea of flow, where people gather. And again, the sound here plays a big role. Participant observation. Okay, participant observation is the center of ethnography. And the most important thing I think you can take away from this is that, how do I tell you quickly? You'll need to read this, but participant observation is actually doing something in the space. And when we get to the remote thing, I guess what I think you should do is you should be social distancing like everyone else. And what you will learn is how it feels to social distance in a space. And it is the idea, from a research point of view, that you are the instrument. You're not asking questions. You're not mapping. You yourself are experiencing the space. And the idea is that as you experience the space, you are being enculturated. The space will teach you how to behave. If you do something in a space that you're not supposed to do, I hear, if you read it, there is a homeless man who's there and he's asking for money. And again, you have the personal comments on one side and the observations on the other. Is that again clear?
Yes.
Anyhow, the homeless man, he goes, "Hola chica, mira, soy homeless. Ayúdame para un trago." He says, you know, he wants a drink. He wants money for a drink in Spanish. And I speak Spanish, so did the student who was doing this observation. And he's asking over here, how does he know I speak Spanish? He wants to know how he knows the guy knows to speak Spanish, which is kind of interesting. But what he's trying to also do is to tell you what it's like to be in that space, to be, you know, that he, as in this case, Puerto Rican man, was asked for money by this man who was homeless and needed money. It is unlikely that that same man would have spoken to me in Spanish. Even though I speak Spanish, I don't look like I speak Spanish. And because I'm an older woman, it's unlikely that he would approach me at all, right? So you begin to learn who you are in the space and what can be learned from who you are. And collectively, if you work as a research group, you begin to learn quite a bit. Okay. So participant observation is very subjective. And the idea is to learn through your own self. That the space will tell you how to be. If you go to Hudson, all right, so I give you an example. You saw Hudson Yards last night, yes? All of you saw the presentation, remember?
Yes.
Okay, so I have two students working there. And one started walking around and looking at things. She kept looking at people. She took a picture with her thing, and immediately two guards came over. Do you follow me? It wasn't that fast that the guards came over. What did she learn? What do you think she learned? Kit, you looking at me? What did she learn? If two guards came over the minute she started looking around and taking a picture, what does that tell you about the space? You have to unmute.
Surveillance?
Huh? Surveillance.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Surveillance, lots of it. And he said that last time. Did he try to explain why? This is a place really for rich people. It's not really a public space. It turns out, as he was trying to explain, it's really private. They pretend that it's public. God knows what's public. And everything about it that you do would create a response. You aren't allowed to do anything. My other student stepped off the gravel onto the grass. You saw the design last night with the gravel and the grass. He stepped on the grass, and immediately a guard came over and told him he could not step on the grass. But he learned through his own body, through his own experience, what Minodrag was talking about last night. You don't need to know the whole history of Hudson Yards to know that it's heavily surveilled and that you're not wanted there. And if you happen to be Black or poor or homeless, you will be taken out immediately. And you will find that out if you happen to look different than anyone else there. All right. So it's this idea that who you are, that the space will tell you its rules, its hidden rules, if you pay attention. Yeah. Okay. Next. All right. So again, we don't have time to do this. This is participant observation. A large public space is challenging. How would you start on this promenade? There's my husband. I don't know if you can see my cursor. There's my little husband. There's my husband right there taking pictures. It's all men again, right? What did you do, women? What would you do? I mean, here's a case. How do you participate in a heavily male environment? This is in Latin America. Anyhow, I take my husband with me. That's one of the things I do. You don't all have husbands, but you do sometimes have teammates. And if you go into a very male space and it makes you uncomfortable, it is something to consider that you take someone else who identifies their gender differently. This is even more complicated, and I leave to your professors. This is in Göttingen in Germany, and this is a man who has been drinking. These are two policemen. I'm right here in my purple jacket. Can you see the purple jacket? I'm pretty close. And the question is, what do you do? Would you try to interfere? Would you they didn't want me there. I wanted to see what was going on with the policing. These are very complicated situations, and you have to talk about that with your professors. But they also tell you a lot about the policing in public space. And if any of you have been watching the news on the protests in the United States right now, you know that I'm interested in the way in which public space is racialized, how it can be a place of exclusion. Now, interviewing, I think you're not going to do on site. And I have given you questions, and I am sure that many of you have interviewed before. I, again, am suggesting you put questions on one side and answers here. I've given you lots of sample questions that you might like, or you make up your own questions. But what I am going to suggest is it's possible you can do interviewing of experts by Zoom. So maybe we should talk about that a little later. Am I right, Hendrik, that they're really not going to try to interview people on site?
Well, I think that this workshop is basically only that week here, right? But our students are still in the process of doing their thesis. So they're still 2 months working on something, right?
So then they will. Okay.
So the end of this project is the starting point of another project, right? So
okay. So they can have this for this. I mean,
yeah,
but I don't want to concentrate on that.
Yeah.
And here again, these are all just examples. This is a guy who rides a bike. One of the ways to do your interviews is to have something in common. If you came in on a bike and he's on a bike, you could talk to him about biking. Those of you who are uncomfortable with talking to strangers, it's often very useful to try to think about things to what we call establish rapport. There are lots of ways to establish rapport, something we could talk about. And here, this is in Dandora in Nairobi, and this is a community project. That some of the best ways to interview is to work with community members and to become to collaborate rather than interview. And that's something that I've been really working on, especially now that learning and training together. The test was designed so that local community members could do it themselves. So ideally, rather than interviewing, you think of finding partners in your community who would like to work with you, or to do the kind of, to learn about the community. Because what you do need from those interviews is an understanding of what's going on. The important part, again, of the ethnography is that you'll see something happen. Okay, you'll see it happen. So let me give you an example. Okay, Hudson Yards, you see a sign that says, do not go beyond this point, a big stop sign, and you see a guard, right? You see that. And then in your participant observation, you get stopped when you try to move somewhere or take a picture, right? You still don't know everything. The most important thing would be then if you could interview that guard to see what the guard thinks about what he's doing, to understand what it means to him, and to interview, say, someone else who maybe wasn't stopped because she was an older woman or a man or something, to try to understand that. I have friends who think that Hudson Yards is fantastic, and I can't bear to be there. I mean, people experience places differently, and it's only through an interview that you can test that. All right. So interviews are useful. They're just not your only tool. The other thing you can do a lot of now, and I know that you will, is doing your historical research. This is historical research for Tompkins Park. Again, you can look at the thing, and it includes newspapers, archival materials, planning documents. Again, I'm sure that you have collected all of these blogs, internet posting, anything you can learn about the history and evolution of a public space. And for many of you, this is a better way to start. It depends on your project, but sometimes it's better to start with the history, because the history will suggest what kinds of issues you want to look at. Okay, moving on. What time is it? Okay, and these are questions. One of the things I think you're used to doing is, I like to interview who designed it. So when was this place designed and built? Who built it? Are there community groups involved? These are important questions to be able to answer. And again, an example, this was my original plaza. I'm not going to talk about it. You can read about it on the plaza, but it was torn down and redesigned, and it ruined the plaza because they put out everybody who ever used it. This is in Nairobi again, in Dandora, which is a very successful project. There I am with Michael McHaffey and Cecilia Anderson, and which was led by local residents and has a history going back to the platting of the community. Okay, so I promised that I would talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk about a little bit about doing this remotely, and then talk just a little bit about analysis. Okay, are we about right on time?
Yeah, I think we still have maybe 5. This is an important part. I think Joseph for the
5 minutes.
Session, yeah. Joseph for the next session is already here, so welcome, Joseph.
Okay,
that is no problem. But I think he said he's fine, and I find that this point is a very important one. So
okay, so let's just go over this, and the analysis you can do later. Okay, so observation. I don't see any reason why you can't do observation from 6 feet away wearing a mask. I just don't see, I don't think pure observation is going to be a problem. And I feel that you can do the behavioral mapping, but you all can use Google Maps and GIS mapping. And many of you have access to apps in which you can use an app on your, iPhone or whatever, or even on others, to be able to successfully map movement. Am I correct? You have all access. Participant observation remaining 6 feet away is a little more complicated. So I am suggesting that you might try it. I don't know. I haven't tried it yet. A little bit at the beach I've tried. People are a little uncomfortable, but you could supplement it with online videos, recorded narratives, social media records, reports from journalists. I've been using that a lot to get a sense of what's going on, especially like during these protests. I couldn't be in those places. You can get a tremendous amount of information, and that gives you some sense of what it's like to be in that space. As for interviewing, I think it's possible while through WhatsApp or FaceTime while in it, or you could be doing interviewing by Zoom when not in the space. I have suggested that you use expert interviewers, interviewees, like who designed the space or who is in charge of the space, or municipal employees, or all kinds of people who would maybe give you an overview and then ask them if they could think of people that you might interview. And you would do what's called snowball interviewing to find people to interview. And I think that that will work. I would expand your historical work and your newspaper searches to make sure you're asking the right questions. So that would be sort of traditional work. But then I've been collecting a lot of articles on the use of social media. So for instance, we just did a scraping up. My chair of my department just scraped Twitter for, what did he do it for? Something to do with a protest. Oh, on blacks in Ivory Tower. And he hand scraped, he got 8,500 responses that he's content analyzing. Now that's not about the place so much, but you can do the same thing. I've done it for parks in New York City. It's easy. You can do travel sites listings like TripAdvisor and Yelp. You can use Google Maps with their hierarchies of numbers and qualitative responses. You just need to remember you can use commercial data scraping companies. You can do Instagram text and photograph analysis. You can do self-generated daily diaries with photographs of locations. You can ask people to keep diaries. And you can do an analysis of self-generated photographs and videos produced while the researcher is not there. The only thing that I hesitate on any of these, and I think this is where we're going to go, is that you need to think through some questions. You know, what is the relationship between the virtual and physically grounded? You need to remember that the virtual and internet are very privatized. What are, the whole platform capitalism. All social media has selection bias, but so does participant observation. You can certainly use it to generate questions. And as I said, this is probably the first time people will be happy to be interviewed by telephone or Zoom. Anyhow, I don't have time to talk about analysis, but the importance of a test is that you bring together data from different parts of your analysis. So one of the things about the social media is you need to be able to question what it is you're getting. You need to be very, very critical, and then compare it to what you can see, to the historical documents, to what you yourself have been able to generate on the site itself. And one of the ways I suggest that you write a report and get a sense of what kind of data you have is think about it in terms of user groups, activities, conflicts, and begin to see what is absent, what do you need, and then begin to find methods that finish it. And that's it. All right.
Thanks so much, Seta.
Okay.
I think it's amazing presentation, very well structured, and I think we know now, of course, for this workshop, which is just a week, you cannot use all this. However, I mean, we are all still evolving. I'm still learning. I'm old, but I'm still learning, right? And but I think many of you are also involved in thesis projects at the moment.
Right.
And I think you can use it for that also to go deeper in your analysis.
Well, it sounded like the history is going to be the most productive for this. It sounded like that's what most of you will be using, but certainly some of the mapping and some of the critical scraping and whatever, are you going to try it? Have any of you been using those methods already? Have any of you been scraping and been trying to use social media to understand a place and how people are responding? It's really, I had a class this semester and we had to stop in the middle. It's on the ethnography of space and place. And so we turned to all those sites that I talked about and looked at what we got. You know, and it's very interesting. You have to be careful. Hendrik needs to work with you as how to use it, or Manfredi or whatever, but it is very interesting material there, and I think that you will find it very useful and interesting as you compare it with that which you can see on the site. I would suggest you try it and then tell me how it goes.
I think yesterday we had a presentation of Manfredo also, who's basically through the crisis, right? Scraping Instagram information and so on.
Yeah.
So we had a presentation on that.
Manfredo, what have you gotten? What have you gotten? Have you gotten a lot?
You're muted.
Yeah, I can send you the presentation probably. So if you want, I can give it to you.
I'd like to see. I'd like to see what you're getting. I'd like to see more and more of what we can get. Because did you think it was useful?
Well, interesting. But it's a very particular kind of research that I'm doing. So I'm downloading batch data over one entire year from particular areas, and then analyzing them from the standpoint of network analysis, and then I do content and images.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you could content analyze it from design features, or you could analyze it from, you know, what people don't like. All I can tell you from what I've done is it's often the negative responses that lead you to new questions that you hadn't answered before. I found it very, very useful. I think the trickiest is Instagram, but it's also the most productive. But you need to be able to analyze the text with the picture, and we need to work on those. But I think it has potential. Anyhow, I'm going to say goodnight.
Thank you so much, Seta.
You're welcome.
Take input, and we stay in contact anyway. We will come back to you also for this other webinar roundtable. And stay healthy, right?
Yeah, have a nice day, everybody. I'm sorry I can't stay. I'm going to bed. Bye.